Sydney's the place to buy, Melbourne's the place to buy. But then I've also heard a lot of stories around how that's not gone as planned. Recently heard another story like that through a friend, and it made me honestly think, thank God I actually didn't take that road, because I would be in a really, really stressed situation right now. So
I want you guys to hear from someone who purchased a property about 7 months ago, has had some interesting takes, I guess, with their tenants and property management experience. But I want to showcase what that looks like from someone who possibly never heard of a buyer's agent to now purchasing with the help of a buyer's agent. So we're going to have Hanette come share her story. But if you're interested, definitely subscribe to the channel and dive in. Hi, Hanette. How are you? Welcome.
good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. It must be sort of weird because you've been watching the channel for a while. Now you'll be on the channel. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually came across your channel during COVID, which was really interesting. It popped up as a video and I thought, let me have a look at this. And yeah, here we are 4 years later. So
that's crazy. So 2020, the journey starts?
Yeah, 2020 came across your videos when I was frantically looking for options of how to grow, and came across your content and thought it was great. And yeah, 4 years later, still watching your videos.
Oh, you're not sick of it. That's great.
No, I'm not. Actually, I love them. I love the raw content. It's great. So.
I love it. Okay. So walk me through it. Lockdowns occur.
Yeah.
You're sitting at home and you mentioned growing. So were you looking at property specifically, or were you going investing in general?
Yeah, I was looking at investing, and then I thought, is there a way to get to where I want to be quicker? Because, I'm sick of life, don't want to live pay to pay, want to be able to do things for my family in the future. There must be a quicker way other than just through work. And then I was searching a lot of content around that stuff, and one of your videos popped up. And it was a video around if you just save and then put your money into the first property, you'll see a snowball effect and you'll accumulate wealth pretty quickly. And then just got really fascinated with property and been reading about it a lot ever since, and got a book about it at home, and been talking to a lot of people as well. So it's been really
So you
good.
basically created this ecosystem around you where you were like absorbing all this information, whether it was audio, podcast, YouTube, it was all like your entire life.
Pretty much. And it's quite funny because my partner at the time, he was more into investing and everything, but not property.
Okay.
And so every day I would go to him and tell him a fun fact, or, oh my God, there's this guy on YouTube and he's talking about property, and like, he's not even 30, like, we're still young, we're not old, check this out. And I would just talk to him about it all the time. So
because he was more into the shares side of things, right?
Yeah, more into that, and trading and those kind of things. And I was more about, how can I look at different options that are easier, that I don't have to think about all the time. And property was one of them. So
yeah, because trading is often quite active, and then we wanted a more passive way to do this, where initially it could be active and there's a few phone calls you get every so often, but are largely, passive, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And now this is an interesting story, which I didn't sort of brief you on before, but it's just come to mind that how did we first meet? Where did we first meet?
Oh, yeah, this is funny. So, we met at a crypto conference, I remember, at the Binance stand. But I remember speaking to your partner for a while before, and then saw that you guys were at this event and just wanted to meet you guys in person. And I know my partner was with me at the time. And we just started talking about what you've been doing. and then I met your partner for dinner at one point, and it just eventuated to more than that. So
it's crazy,
it was really
because
fun.
It's like some person you just watched on YouTube, and then we met in person, and then we're now here, and this is probably the second or third time you've been in the office as well. So it's cool how we've got here. But now I wanted to talk some numbers, because everyone listening loves the numbers. So we ended up purchasing a property in November, December of 23, and we purchased for 451.
Correct.
From memory. And it was a 422, so 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom in North Queensland.
Correct.
And I want to sort of break down that process. So how did we even land on that property specifically? Were you after a buyer's agent, like you knew that you needed the help, or were you going and researching yourself and then decided to go that way?
Yeah. So I definitely needed the help, because the idea was, how can I make this process easier? I'm not someone that likes to be constantly actively involved in things, but more, how do I get the professionals in and outsource a bit more while still getting to where I want to be? So I'd heard about buyer's agents, and then also saw on your channel that, that was something that you guys do as well. And It seemed like a smart move, especially talking to friends of mine. They'd said it's great for like market comparison and just getting a holistic overview of what you can get. So for me, it was like a no-brainer instead of, manually putting in all this work and losing a nice house to someone else and just stressing all over that, especially if you're working 9 to 5. So yeah.
Because it's so difficult. Like obviously now things have changed where you can sort of do hybrid working.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were doing 5 days in the office, by the time you get home, you're not wanting to, open up a laptop and look on real estate, right?
Just a Netflix, maybe an episode of Friends, and then just want to pass out. So yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so you go across that journey. Obviously you've been watching the content for a while.
Yep.
You come across our stuff. How's that experience been? From start to finish with going and purchasing property, which you've probably learnt a lot about, but this was the first time your money is going into, right?
Yeah. So the experience was really good. And I think the big thing for me was the communication and the aftercare as well, because that was something I was worried about going into the process. It's all well and good going through the process, but what if I need help afterwards? Or what if I need introductions to other people? Like, there's solicitors involved in the process. There's, agents. There's a lot going on. And I was so overwhelmed. I think I had like a million questions for you guys at the time. And the team took so much time to come back to me on the questions. And I ask a lot of questions. So it was really reassuring to get the answers to those questions. And it made me feel a lot more comfortable. So I would say that was a big plus for me, because friends of mine have not necessarily had that experience, and it's nice to know that there are people out there that can show you a different side of the coin, basically. So
yeah, it's interesting because real estate for some people, you go, they've had the best experience, or they have the polar opposite and it's the worst thing ever.
Yep.
And it's because there's such a large amount of money, there's that stress associated with it.
100%.
And you probably go through life and sometimes people will buy 2 to 3 properties ever.
Yeah.
So it's something that you want to nail when you actually do it.
Yeah.
And so for you, having that support, just asking the right people, the right questions, obviously helped in that journey, yeah?
Yeah. And I think the other thing was like I went into it assuming from what you hear across your network that, Sydney's the place to buy, Melbourne's the place to buy. But then I've also heard a lot of stories around how that's not gone as planned. Recently heard another story like that through a friend, and it made me honestly think, thank God I actually didn't take that road, because I would be in a really, really stressed situation right now. So I think having the expertise of a buyer's agent, like I had no idea that, where I'd bought was an area that would be up and coming and booming, because all you hear about is the metro areas like Sydney, Melbourne, Brizzy,
Yeah, it's pretty much my entire journey from day dot when I started as well. It was like the same sort of content was coming out.
Yeah.
A different format, obviously. It was the newspaper or articles that you read in magazines, and it was always, don't buy regionally, they're rural towns, mining towns, this and that, and they'll scare you. And it was just, come back, buy in Sydney. And the reality is, like, Sydney 20, 30 years ago, you could probably have gotten something, but now the reality is it's so hard.
Yeah.
So for your property, we purchased at $451K for a 4-bedroom house. How much does that cost around where you live?
That's a good point. Well, to put it into perspective, like I live in a 2-bedroom apartment right now, and that was $960K when the owners bought that last year in October.
Wow.
There's been quite a few issues with it since moving in the first couple of months. And the size is not comparative whatsoever. So I would say something of a 4-bedroom, like at least like we're talking like, 1.2 or something in the area I'm in. So and you don't get the space the same way. So,
and the other part that's hard is your borrowing capacity probably wouldn't have allowed you to buy something at that price point, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's quite interesting because the landlord had actually visited us recently where we are in the 2-bedroom, and he didn't realize there were quite a few issues with it, and he hadn't seen the property, but he's planning on moving into it eventually. And so that was another wake-up call for me, like, okay, he bought this property for $960K. It's pretty small, probably enough for a couple, and there's quite a few issues with the wiring, with the plumbing, like loads of things that they can't control because it's a unit in a building.
So what you're telling me is even though it was expensive doesn't mean it was a quality build or it was
No, it
great.
looks fantastic aesthetically, like really nice, newly painted wooden floors, but when you really listen out for issues, you kind of think, wow, like that's a lot of money. And yeah, they spent quite a bit in the first month to repair some things already. So Plus with the interest rates at the moment, I would say, it's not great. So
I mean, I think we both have people that we know that had bought in Sydney or at that $1 million mark, and interest rates were lower, so it was manageable.
Yeah.
But now, do you have people around you that are struggling because the interest rates are high?
Yeah. And it's actually interesting because I lived in another part of Sydney before, and when the interest rates first started going up, we saw like a load of people selling their houses. People that would have never sold in that suburb, but they started selling up all their houses, and then all the stuff started coming out about mortgages not being affordable because they didn't buffer for, another $1,500 or $2,000. But now they're struggling or they've lost their job. So I've definitely heard a lot of struggles just from random people, neighbors, but also, people at work complaining about quite a few things and, wanting to be paid more. So unfortunately, it is what it is. And it's just like, how else can we increase cash flow? What else can we be thinking in times like these? So yeah, very happy that I took the route that I took. Yeah.
Now, and I guess it's further emphasized because you've had some changes in work.
Yeah.
And your situation at work's changed. So now you may be leaving, you may have already left, but how much of that would have been different? Say you had a $800,000 loan for a house that you were living in versus at the moment you still have a house and you've got a mortgage. But has that decision been easier or harder having gone down this path?
Yeah, it's definitely been easier. If I was in a situation where I'd bought in Sydney and for whatever reason there was redundancy or a change or whatever, I couldn't work. Maybe I have an accident and I can't work, for example, I probably have to sell my house like ASAP. So, but it's much more manageable for the price. Like the apartment I'm in now, for that price, you can get 2.5 somewhere else in Australia. And so it's really reassuring that it's at least manageable when situations change for you personally. So yeah, I would say I would be in a very, very different situation had I bought in a metro area.
And it's hard, like even though your rents have probably gone up in that same amount of time, the amount that your repayments would have gone up is so much higher, especially if you had bought locally, right?
Yeah. And the other thing I guess is just thinking about if I'd bought in Sydney, I would have had to buy with my partner as well. And, that's another situation in itself. Okay, what about your share? What are we going to do about the mortgage?
True, yeah.
So thank God I don't have to approach that conversation. But yeah, I think it was definitely the easier route for me, for sure. And I definitely learned a lot of things, but I think a big plus as well, getting the expertise, was getting all the referrals and being walked through the process, especially when it came to things like, okay, cool, it's in a different area of Australia. I don't know it like I know Sydney. What do I look out for in those areas? Like in Queensland, for example, there's a lot of tornadoes or cyclones or whatever.
Flooding as well.
And then, exactly. And it's like, what do I look at when I look at a property? So having the expertise and assistance for that was helpful. And again, added to more of a sort of, okay, I got this, like it's not stressful. So I actually think I would have been more stressed buying in Sydney, getting a bigger loan.
Yeah, true.
Then my circumstances change. Even with all the expertise, it wouldn't matter because I would have a really hefty loan, and it would be a very different situation. I don't want to imagine it, to be honest, but yeah.
I've bought a lot of property, and what you're describing also scares me. And I've seen it with like close family as well. They've got houses in Sydney, and it's the one thing that they have, and they're holding on for dear life. Like, interest rates, they're so like sensitive towards any information that comes out, media headlines saying that interest rates may go up a little bit. And in our case, it's like, okay, I know what they're trying to do, but if you've got a mortgage and you're struggling already, having to come up with an extra $50 a week is going to be so difficult for people. And especially with prices where they're at in Sydney, it's like, how much are you making? How much is wage growth compared to how much your repayments have gone up? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because you mentioned work situation could change and things. And one of the first questions my friends in Sydney asked me who own property was, but good that you don't have a mortgage here, and I can't imagine. And I was thinking to myself, well, yeah,
you also have the choice.
Good thing I don't. And that's the thing. I do believe, people have the choice and the lifestyle that they want. And for me, I'm an only child, my family live overseas, and there's a lot of ways that I want to be able to help them in the future. And this is a quicker way of doing that. So yeah, I definitely think it was a great path to take.
Because I remember when we first connected, that was a big motivation for you.
Yeah,
was
100%.
How do I continue building my wealth? I have balance in my lifestyle where I can still do what I need to do on an everyday basis, but how do I build wealth enough so that I can eventually help my parents?
Yeah, exactly. So, and like, my mom's thinking of buying a place, and she's worried that she won't have anything for her future. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, thank God I'm doing this kind of stuff out here, because if she can't work in the future, or if she's tired because she's already in her 50s, then I don't need to worry as much. Or if she decides to buy something, I can sell something here and help her pay down the mortgage. So there's so many options that it provides for you, whilst at the same time not sacrificing my lifestyle here, because I want to enjoy my life as well, right? It's not just work hard and pay it all off to your parents. It's also, I want to enjoy my life.
You're living your best life as well. So that's important. So
exactly.
That 451K property, now 7 months later, what do you think it's probably worth? What would you, because average growth, I mean, we would have put into perspective. Obviously, what we've seen over the last 5 years is not normal.
Yeah.
And could it be different? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But average growth is anywhere between sort of 6 and 8%. We usually tell you 7% is where we want to be.
Yeah.
So what do you think it's worth at the moment?
So I thought it would be worth around the 500K mark.
Yep.
But I could be slightly wrong there. So would love to know.
Yeah. So you're really close to it.
Okay.
So when it comes to obviously bank valuations, they're a bit lower than where we would be when it comes to the market.
Yeah.
So we're sort of sitting at that 490 mark.
Yep.
So at 490, it's gone up.
Amazing.
Quick maths, 49K.
Yeah.
It's almost about 10%. In 7 months. So
amazing.
Annualized, you're looking at 17%.
Yep.
A lot higher than what we initially anticipated, which is amazing. And that's where we want to be, how do we keep targeting the right areas? And right now, North Queensland might be working, and it worked back then.
Yeah.
It may not be in 2 years' time. So we always keep diversifying and adapting, right?
Yeah.
Now, when we initially brought the property to you, we also give you an idea of how much it could rent for. Do you remember how much it was going to rent for? Or?
$520 a week.
Okay, $520. And how much is it renting for at the moment?
$520 a week.
Okay, so we got that part down.
Yes.
And when it looks like projections for, say, next year, we usually give that first year and the second year. What did we say the second year was most likely going to be?
So you guys said 540, but actually when I spoke to the agent, she said I could probably get you more than that, because the area is booming more than that, more around the 560, maybe even 570 mark. Mm-hmm. But we'll obviously evaluate that again at the time. But she said easily. And when I looked at the area, like the same street, she was bang on point about that. The property prices have boomed and the rent is pretty strong. Mm-hmm. And that's like without any renovations. And I'm going to be adding some things to the property. So might even be upwards of 570, who knows, by that point. But yeah, definitely smash the 540, which is great. So.
Yeah, it gives you so many options. And I guess with your property, what year was it built in? It was fairly new build.
Yeah, I think it was 2009? I think it was 2009. I think so, yeah.
So we're looking at how many years is that? 14, 15 years, right? So it's not that old when you're looking at property. I've got personal properties that were born, I guess built in like 1960, 1970. So sometimes I see the ones that you guys are buying and I'm like, they look so much better than the ones I've got. Now that you've gone through the journey, do you have any sort of advice for people that are sort of where you were in 2020 or 21, people aspiring to get into the property market, whether it's buying their own place or investing, any sort of advice for them?
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice I'd probably give someone is don't listen to the noise around you. And if you really want something, trust me, you'll be able to make it happen. But if you think that it's something that you may not be able to handle yourself, like find the expertise, outsource it, and it will feel so much better. And you'll start to feel like you're making progress towards your vision or your goals, however long they may be or whatever timeline you have on it. That would probably be my number one thing, because, the noise can be a lot sometimes. And if you don't tune out the noise, you get lost in the noise.
I love that because, for me in my head, everything is a distraction. So when it comes to investing, whether it comes to building a business, finding a new job, everything's a distraction.
100%.
You just got to find your scope of focus, and that's what you focus on.
100%. Yeah.
Look, I've really appreciated your time.
No worries.
And thank you so much, Annette.
Yeah, thank you for having
coming
me.
on.
Yeah, lovely seeing you again. All right.